This segment is brought to you by Jigmaster Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
Welcome to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. This is the final cast segment with your hosts Brad Hicks and Josh Eldridge, where we cast our final opinions on all products, good and bad. Welcome to the final cast. Welcome back to the final cast on the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. I'm Brad.
I'm Josh.
And we got
JP.
JP on the final cast. What's up, dude?
Not much, man. Just chilling right now. I was out fishing all day, and I did pretty damn good.
I know that fish was big. How big was it?
19 and a quarter.
That's pretty good.
Heck yeah, where were you fishing?
So it was a new lake to me, but it's a state park lake. It's called Shabana Lake. It's about an hour and some change west of where I'm at.
I saw your comment on there, and I read it as Shaboner.
That's exactly what we call it around here.
Well, I thought you were joking with somebody because you didn't want them to know what lake it was.
No, that's.
Wait a second. Well, you guys go ahead and talk. All right. Go ahead and talk.
All right. Yeah, that's the running joke around it. Everyone calls it Shaboner.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, we're just gonna do a little talking tonight. Fishing line. We're gonna get a couple other guys on here, but I don't think everybody's schedule's lined up. So, let's talk some fishing line. We got Brian the Killer Schiller.
He doesn't look like such a killer.
We literally just started recording.
Oh, my bad.
It's all good. We're gonna do an episode talking about line,
Fishing line.
some fishing line. So
Awesome.
yeah, I don't know where you guys want to start, but Josh, you want to start?
Let's start at everybody's tried and true fishing line. Old monofilament.
Yeah.
Mano y mano.
Yeah. So, Brad Hicks, what is your first fishing line? Not your first fishing line ever, but like the first thing you got into buying.
Probably the Berkeley Trilene XT. Is that what it is? XT?
Yeah. Extra tough.
Yeah. I think it was 8-pound. Moss green? Was that a color?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I think it was lime green, wasn't it? Like a brighter green?
Yeah, something like that.
Low vis.
Yeah, he had a low vis, and there was like a lot of people call it mossy green. They also have a high vis version, Brian, but usually that was in the I want to say like they called it big cat or big game. I think it was like for kind of aimed at catfishing and stuff like that. It came in like real heavy stuff, but I'm sure they made a high vis, light pound test version of it at some point. I never bought that. I bought either clear or the moss green.
Yeah, I used the old Stren. It was like blue steel color or something like that.
Yeah.
I've used that
it had
before.
Like
I didn't.
blue tint to it.
Yeah, I didn't like it as well as Trilene, but I felt like it held more memory.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I used to run some heavy Stren on my trolling rods when I'd go out trolling out of my big boat.
Yeah, I actually don't use mono at all anymore, I don't think. I have a spool of it, but I don't use it.
Yeah. I use the fluoro-coated stuff, and that stuff's super nice.
Yeah, I literally before this podcast, I just ordered the P-Line Tactical.
Yeah.
That's actual straight fluorocarbon.
Okay. Which one? What was the one? What is the mixed one from P-Line?
Fluoro Clear.
That's the one you were telling me about.
That's the bee's knees.
The bee's knees. Do you get it, Brian, because of the memory factor?
I get it because of the cost factor. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny, man. Like last year when I was deep into the tournament scene, like I would replace all my line on all my rods like the night before a tournament. So if you're like, I'm not a big braid to leader guy. Um, that's just a personal preference. A, I think it's a pain to tie leaders. B, I feel like that's just one thing that could fail, like when you're in a tournament scenario. So I like to run just straight line. The only time I run straight braid really is like top water, but when I was respooling, obviously, if you're doing straight floral, that's $20 a rod. Times that by like 8 or 9 rods, that adds up real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I was down at KBF FLW Open, I went into a tackle shop there, and they didn't have like the normal floral I was using, so I picked up some of that floral clear by P Line. It was $9 a spool, or $8.99 or seven. Yeah, $8.99 I think is what it is, and spooled it up, and I was really impressed. And then I ran that on a lot of my rods last year.
What exactly is the difference between the coated and just regular fluorocarbon?
So I'm not a 100% line expert, but what I can say, just from my experience, is that fluoro clear or the fluoro coated monos or whatever that are out there. One thing that I've noticed, and you hear a lot when you hear the talk about mono, is mono will stretch a little. So I think you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of give in that line when you go to set the hook. And then also it's a thinner diameter, and it's a little bit clearer in the water.
And it sinks a little better because mono floats.
Sinks. Yeah, it definitely sinks. So like where it really shines is like Ned rig. Because I always throw the lightest head possible on a Ned rig. What is that, a 15th ounce or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I very rarely throw a 10th. And with that floral clear, it definitely sinks like a fluorocarbon line will. Whereas a fluorocarbon, there's not really any give in that line, but it's super tough. So I'll run like the P Line Tactical on my jig rods, like in 17 to 20 pound tests.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why I use the fluorocarbon in the rivers, because it's tough.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, mono's tough too, but the problem with mono that I found, because I started out like the trilene stuff that was really popular here in Ohio in the rivers, like just about everybody you talk to was like, yeah, get, trilene extra tough because it's, abrasive resistant and this and that. But the problem that I found was trying to fish like crawls and stuff like that on the bottom with it. And you're fishing like slack water areas and you're throwing an 8 to 10 pound, monofilament line. And it's fairly thin. It's thin enough to get the job done. And it's not probably even that noticeable to the fish. But the problem is that your bait took forever if it reached the bottom, especially if you're starting to throw really light weights. I mean, if you throw obviously heavy enough weight, that it can get it down, but then you're fighting the rocks and the snags for river fishing. So eventually I kind of, after doing a little bit of research, switched up to fluoro, but that was just like last year that I actually started throwing fluoro on a spinning reel, which a lot of people don't like because fluoro tends to have pretty gnarly memory, but I didn't have too much problem with it, as long as I didn't overfill my spool. But it definitely would hold the memory for sure. I just didn't throw a spinning rod that often to really, I think, care.
Yeah. See,
But
I'm in the market for some new fluorocarbon because I'm using the Strin. I don't know exactly what it is. I forget, but it's like $10 for the whole roll of it.
Yeah.
and it just it has so much memory. I just put this line on my rod just a few months ago, and it already has the coils when you cast, and it kind of
Well,
like it your accuracy goes down, your distance goes down, and it kind of annoys me. So I'm kind of in the market for some new stuff.
I will say this. I think for at least in my experience, and when I first started fishing as a kid, everyone had trilene, like he said. I started off with trilene XT, and I strictly used mono for everything. Later on, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, is when I started with fluorocarbon, experimenting with that, and it made a world of a difference. However, starting from the spectrum of cheap fluorocarbon going all the way up to your expensive Seagar, there's a huge difference in terms of quality of that line. And going through, and I'll go through a couple that I've used where the quality is absolutely horrible and why I would pick Seagar over anything else. But different applications, you're going to get, a lot of similar not necessarily backlash, but line twist, because a lot of times both fluoro and mono do not work well with wind resistant or current resistant, and that's
Yeah.
where a lot of your line twists are coming into play. However, what really is the key difference is the quality, especially at fluorocarbon, the quality of the full core of that line. So mono, I will still use throwing top water. I throw
Yeah.
all my top, and I also throw spinner baits with mono. The only reason why I throw the spinner baits with mono is because I want it to stay mid-level in that water column. I'm not trying to get it down.
Mhm.
It's especially if I'm getting closer back to that boat, I want to start breaking the surface a little bit with that spinner bait. So mono is a good applicant for that. Versus fluorocarbon, I'll run any crankbait that I'm throwing, whether it's a square bill or a deep diving crankbait, run on floral just because I could get it down there, keep it in the strike zone, and stays there.
Yeah.
The biggest thing though is also selecting the right size. So when we talk about pound, what pound test has to go with fluorocarbon and monofilament and braid. It's not necessarily the pound test, but it's the diameter size
Mhm.
of the line. If you're using too small of a diameter for that lure, especially with crankbaits, are not going to run true because it's either too big or too small. You kind of got to find that happy medium. I always tell everybody 12 to 15 is that happy medium until you start going technique specific. Then you start picking up bigger lines or smaller lines if you're going into finesse style. Perfect example is when I run a chatterbait, straight fluorocarbon, 17-pound test.
Mhm.
And chatterbait, it's to keep it's because that especially with the jackhammers and even thunder crickets, the way it's running that shroud and the line is keeping it right above that weed line. You're not sinking
Mhm.
all the way in, but you're keeping it right there because of how it has a heavier size and gauge, and the diameter or the line gauge is thicker, so it stays. Even though it gets down, it stays off the ground and keeps it there. Now, if you go to 12, you're gonna bounce. You're gonna have to bounce and maintain a faster speed to keep that lure above that weed line when you're fishing it. Some things I found with Floralo, and like I said, I primarily use Seagar, but I've experimented with quite a different bit. And this is just my opinion. Anybody else can, you can disagree with what I had to say. But the two worst florals that I've used that really, really have messed up, the line or have messed up in bird's nest and just the quality is horrible, is stay away from Yozuri and stay away from the XPS from Bass Pro Shop.
Mhm.
They say it's the Seagar, it's the same one. That's not necessary. You can tell if you take the regular Seagar line and the XPS, hold them together, you can feel the difference in the quality. the Seaguar has a denser floral to it than what the XPS is going to have. And it, again, that density plays a role, especially when you're casting in the elements and we're finding wind and current. What I've been throwing lately on top of the Seaguar is the Suffolk. This is their advanced 100% fluorocarbon. I like it. The one thing that I did find that I did not like about it is that this one is 12, but you have, if you overspool this one, like I could get away with overspooling with the Seaguar. If you overspool with this one, I'm getting a lot of backlash with it. So I had to take about maybe 50 yards off, and not, with that 50 yards off, everything's running fine now. But it's, I mean, very sensitivity's there. It's very durable. Throwing it around, I was around a lot of tree stumps today, a lot of rock pylons as well, and it held up great with it. But hands down, Seaguar for your floral, and then I would go with the Trilene for the mono, and I always that's what I've been using. I've also used the Suffix mono before. It was like a camo, it's like a smoke camo color. That was really good as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Suffix brand for their lighter braid applications and their monofilament. Because I switched from Trilene to Suffix. Suffix was kind of notorious for having like really good sales at our Field and Streams and Cabela's around here. So I would pick up like 5 or 6 spools of it. Like I still have like 3 or 4 like high vis braid spools of Suffix from a sale that they had. But one thing that I do recommend for anybody out there that is throwing spooks, throw it with mono. Because being a topwater bait, like I throw frogs if I can, like with braid. Obviously you usually bring it through the vegetation, and braid cuts through so much better than anything else. It just doesn't, it does really well through vegetation. But if you're throwing a buzz bait, even maybe a buzz bait or a spook, is really where monofilament shines, in my opinion, man, because it floats and it's got that stretch. So when you snap it, it really helps with that walk the dog, that back and forth pattern that you're trying to shoot for. So if you're out throwing a spook, Brad, you may want to try it. Like if you're throwing like a really light one, like a light small spook or something like that, or you ever use those torpedo baits? I used to use those smallmouth fishing, dude. They love those things.
Yeah.
That's throw it on mono. If you want to, if you're trying to avoid throwing like braid and stuff like that. That's just my opinion. I mean, you could do it with the braid, obviously, but I don't know. I think with that little bit of give and that stretch that it does, it kind of helps with the hook set where you're not yanking, the bait out of the fish's mouth like you can tend to do with when you're frog fishing or whatever, because it doesn't have any, braid doesn't have no stretch, so it's easy to yank that bait too quick. So
yeah, that I could see where that helps walking the dog with a spook or something like that. I've tried throwing that with a braid. This was a few years back before I really knew what I was doing, and I just couldn't do it. It felt like I was just jerking the bait and not like actually working it. So it makes sense that the stretch of the mono would help like run it diagonal the way it's supposed to.
We're talking about mono and lures to throw on there as well, and you just mentioned it with the jerk. Any jerk baits that I throw as well, I'm throwing on monofilament just because it with that you could jerk that line down. It's a very slow rise it rises right back to the surface, and it works perfectly for those as well.
What about suspending jerk baits?
Haven't had a problem. The shadow wraps from Rapala, it's what I throw, and they suspend, and I haven't seen any difference. I've thrown them on floral too, but I haven't seen any difference with the mono affecting it being that it suspends. And what about you, Brian? Have you seen
shadow wraps? Who throws shadow wraps? Mega Bass is where it's at, bro. Empty the bank account, my man.
Yeah, okay.
That's one technique I need to get into, man. I can't do it.
Yeah, no, it's it's something I've been fishing more of. I for jerk baits, I use that 12-pound Fluoroclear
Mm.
You use your left hand.
sometimes. I call it the stranger.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that Fluoroclear, man.
Dude,
Ah.
it's I don't know, man. I've been a huge advocate of it since last year when I found it. Like, if you don't want to spend the juice on straight up fluorocarbon, like $22, a spool, or it all depends on the brand. Like fluorocarbon, I found can go anywhere from 20 to $35 a spool, right? And for $9, you get that clear line, thinner line. It's just the best of both worlds, I think. And for the price, really can't beat it. I mean, I wouldn't use it for a topwater frog bite. You know what I mean? But for like some of the, like especially some of the stuff you do, I like what I would recommend. Like I usually use 8-pound for like my Ned rig rod. Get a spool of it, dude. $9. You can't go wrong. Try it out in the river. I know you toss the net a bunch. And then like on that Wicked Willow you've been throwing, I use that 12-pound too.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's running through my mind right now. I got what I throw that Wicked Willow on right now. I'm using braid to a fluoroleader just because I'm lazy. I haven't switched over yet, but I'm
Sure.
looking for new line for it. So.
Well, it's almost like the way I look at it is it's kind of like, like I'm sure you're fishing like a medium heavy fast action rod on that swim, the Wicked Willow or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like when I've been thinking about this a lot lately. When you throw on that Fluoroclear, it almost takes it from a fast action to a moderate action. And on a swim bait or a crankbait, you kind of want that little bit of give, so that way that fish can take it in and slowly set the hook. And kind of on the Ned rig too, because I found when I was throwing straight fluoro, I almost like ripped the bait out of the fish's mouth. Whereas with that little bit of give in the line, as the way this comes from me walleye fishing, like when we're trolling and stuff, we use a lot of mono or braid to mono leaders, because like those fish will come up and grab it and they won't chomp down on it like a bass or a pike or something like that. Walleyes usually like kind of suck it in and then slowly go down. So if you have that little bit of give, and as they feel that bait slowly start to pull back out of their mouth, they bite down harder because they don't want that bait to get away from them, if that makes sense. So it's kind of the same kind of aspect, I think, in my mind. Like with that little bit of give, when you go to set the hook, it gives the fish enough time to react to bite down harder on that bait, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'm currently using braid with the fluoroleader for my Ned rod, and I've talked about it for various reasons, but the main reason is to watch my line. I don't fish the Ned like most people do, Like a lot of people feel like tight line it, feel the bite. I let it drop and then I reel in the slack, and then I watch my line. If it starts moving, I set the hook.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing I was messing up all the time, because I was running Neds on straight fluoro last year, and I kept yanking them that bait out of their mouth. So I switched up to braid on my spinning rod last year or this year, and started tying on a fluoro leader like you're doing, Brad. And instead of like actually hook setting it, I'm treating Neds now like a circle hook, like a wacky rig.
Reel it down.
I'm just reeling. I start reeling down and just pull up. No jerk motion, just because I kind of learned to do that fishing for peacock bass. We were using circle hooks with little live tilapia, and he was laughing at me. He's like, "Dude, you gotta quit hook setting." He's like,
Yeah.
"Just reel into
Yeah.
it, brother." He goes, "That hook's so small, man." And he's like, "You're just ripping that bait, like, and like, you know, the way they were hooking it, I was ripping it out of the bait. The fish is getting the bait, free meal, and I wasn't getting no return here, you know." So
Yeah.
I kind of went to doing that. And dude, I'll tell you what, my hookup ratio on any Ned style bait is just gone through the roof compared to what it was last year. So, you know,
I know what you're saying on that hook set, dude. When we were out in Vegas, we took a guide out on Lake Mead for stripers, and I was doing the same thing, dude. I was like trying to get these monster hook sets, and the guy's like laughing at me. He's like, "Bro, we're fishing for stripers, not like largemouth bass," because we were using chunk bait as our bait, and we were kind of vertically jigging it. And he's just like, "Dude, you got to quit doing that," because I kept missing fish, and it like the fish would steal the bait. And he's like, "Dude, we're gonna run out of bait. You keep setting hooks like that, you know." So it's kind of funny, man. It's hard to get away from that when you're so used to it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost like I was talking about with that little bit of give and that fluoro clear. You know, it almost corrects that, you know, when you're trying to set the hook too hard like that.
yeah.
So
Brian, you've seen me hook set before.
oh my God, dude. I'm surprised those fish have lips left after you get done setting hooks.
I've tried to calm it down.
So speaking of braid to fluoro, what are you guys running for braid now for your setups?
I run on I only run braid on a frog rod, and then on my spinning rod. And on my spinning rod, I'm using high vis Suffix 832, and then I tie whatever 10-pound extra leftover spool of fluoros that I find laying around. And so far, I've only had one knot break. I found this really simple knot to tie online, and it's only failed once this year. So, I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't really see why it failed. I don't know if it was the braid side or the fluoro side, because it came off pretty clean. So, but on that's one thing that I'm kind of in a toss up of, though, is on my frog rod. I'm using like 55, 60 pound, maybe between 50 and 60. I don't remember. It's been on there for a little while. That's the nice thing about braid, everybody, that braid tends to last for a while compared to like your fluoros and stuff. It doesn't get affected by being stored outside and the temperature differences like mono and fluoro does, because that's one thing I've noticed, man. If I haven't re-spooled over the winter time and my rod's been sitting around, dude, usually that fluoro and that mono comes pretty much garbage. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Suffix 832, man. And like I said, you find this stuff, it's not super cheap, but it's not super expensive though either. And I find a lot of deals where it's like buy one get one free. So
yeah, the other reason why I like braid, like you mentioned, is it lasts forever. And then if you do need to respool, what I usually do is I'll tie it together like a leader, you know, and I'll just reel more on if I'm not using any backing line, you know.
yeah.
I'll just reel more on. I mean, I never have any issues with it getting stuck on the guides when you're casting. You can't do that with the other lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, man.
Oh, you're good, man. Yeah, so I'm running 2 different applications with braid right now. The first one is the same way you guys were saying. I actually have I had the Suffix Advanced braid on my small spinning reel for the net rig, and that is the 30-pound, which is a 6-pound mono equivalent. Just because you still get that cut in it, it fits on those 200 or the 100 size spools, so you're still getting a good amount of line there, and it's pretty good backing with the spinning spool. And I'm also running it on my bait caster as well, and I'm using that for jigs, and I'm using the Albright knot. I don't know if that's the knot you're referring to, but it's pretty simple to tie on the water. All it is just an overhand. It's an overhand knot with it. Or you guys know the Bowline Knot?
Mm-mm.
You guys ever hear that? No, Bowline Knot. They always say it's the rabbit that comes through the hole and around the tree.
Yeah.
It's literally the line. You take the line, you run it, you wrap it around. You wrap the braid around the floral like 7 or 8 times, and then you bring the braid back through the hole and tie together. I don't have any problems with it going through the guides. It's pretty small. But one thing I'm going to start applying that for is power drop shotting. And that should be coming soon. It's hopefully I think I heard they're reopening like the lakefront and everything else at the beginning of June, so I can actually get on and actually use the drop shot for smallmouth now. But yeah, using that braid to floral leader, I've been running that. But then, what I really like from traditional braid that's out there is the Power Pro, the Super Slick. This is pretty good stuff, and this is what I'm running. Not only for the jigs, but I'm running that on my for frogging and punching, and I'm running that. I have two setups. I have one that's a 65-pound test, and the other one's a 50-pound test. And I'll run those straight for those, and put the frog on there, or I'll put the if I'm punching, put the heavy weight on there, and it's nicely. Still have the sensitivity, and you have all the power to rip through the mats.
Yeah.
I'm using Power Pro 2, but it's not the super slick. Well, what's the difference with that?
So it's the coating. It's the coating that's on there. Like regular braid, it kind of has more of like a grit to it. This has
More
like a smoother.
waxy?
It's a braid core on the inside. So I'm looking at the fibers. It's all braid, but it has just like a coat on there that it runs through your hand without cutting it, and it cuts right through the weeds as if it was normal braid without any type of coating on it. But yeah, I like it. It works really well.
What about you, Brian? What kind of braid do you like?
I've been using some stuff by Gamma.
Dude, I bought their fluoro at a show.
Yeah.
I got robbed.
Oh, yeah.
They were selling that stuff for like $30. I was like, dude, this must be some high quality stuff. I buy it like 4 or 5 spools of it. I mean, I dropped like, and then probably 4 spools of it. I dropped like $100 at the fishing show on their fluoro, only to come out to find out it's 100 yards. Not even
What?
200.
Oh, really?
Are you talking about the booth that was across from us?
Yeah.
You don't like it?
I'm not a fan of it. It's not that it's bad line, but the fact that it was that expensive and it was only 100 yards, I was like, I didn't even catch it, dude. I just, because looking at it, it looks like a 200-yard spool basically, and I'm like, yeah, I'll give this stuff a shot. I was trying to be nice to the little old lady working the booth, and and then here I am and then I'm like, crap, I don't really like it. I don't like that it's only 100 yards, And then on top of that, I actually threw it on. So I put it on like I think it was either 17 or 20-pound test. I put it on like, my jig rod for like the heavier jigs. And it has this really bad backlash to it. Like, because it's so thick that every time, and no matter what adjustments I made, dude, the only adjustment I could make is to tension everything down so tight, but I could only cast it like 20 yards. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this stuff's ridiculous, man. So,
I'm looking on Tackle Warehouse right now. They have 200-yard spools at $40
Holy crap.
in the Gamma Edge.
Yeah.
And but anyways, I bought some of their braid. That's the Torque. And that comes in a 300-yard spool. And I mean, I don't use a ton of braid. I got it in 50-pound test, I think. And I just strictly use it for top water. I think I still got 2 brand new spools of it chilling in my crate with all my extra reels and lines and stuff like that.
So, get this. I used to use nothing but braid probably about 3 years ago in the river. And I wouldn't use a leader or anything. I'd straight tie like big Joshies to it and crankbaits to it. I'm sitting here wondering why I'm never getting bit and stuff. I'm like, come to find out like a year later that the fish can see the braided line, and I'm like, no wonder.
And that Brad's losing baits to the rocks. Like,
yeah, it's funny though, because the last year, the first time I sat down and respooled everything with fluorocarbon, that year that I caught more fish last year on fluorocarbon than any other line that I've ever used.
Yeah.
So I'm convinced I love fluorocarbon now, but I'm gonna have to try that stuff you mentioned too.
Yeah, I was a big straight braid guy, and then I tried the braid to leader thing, and it's just not my cup of tea. And then I was strictly fluorocarbon, and I was like, I'm gonna have to file bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And then I found that Fluorocare. Like I said, I use that. I found the on Tackle Warehouse, the P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon. They sometimes run a deal where it's buy one get one, or buy 2 get 1 or something like that. It varies, but they do it like every other month. It seems like.
Yeah, I have like 5-6 spools of it because of that sale.
And it makes it totally cheap when you get those deals, because I think that's what normally $21-23 or something.
It's kind of funny. The pricing is based upon what pound test you get. So the higher in pound test, it's like $1.50 more each pound you go up. I'm like, that's odd.
Yeah.
Well, you're using more material is basically what that breaks down to. But it's so I found it last year. They had a deal. I want to say it was buy one get one. So I ordered 2 and I got 2 free, and I started using that. And I love it, man. Like that's, like I said earlier, that 17 or 20-pound test on a jig rod, flipping the Jig Masters jigs. I mean, you could rip those things through all kinds of brush and stuff and not worry about that line breaking.
Let's get into that a little bit. Like we got Jason's favorite, fluoros. So, Brian, what's your experience with the different fluoro brands? What do you like? What do you dislike?
So, I'm opposite of JP. I hate Seagar. And I think that Abrazex is a waste of money. I bought it and I just didn't like it. Ton of line twist I experienced in that stuff, and I didn't see the value in it. I'm trying to think what else. I know I've used a couple. I've used the Abrazex, and I think there's one other one. What other models do they got?
Invizex?
Invizex, yes, thank you. I've used that.
We got Red Line too.
Red Label. I hear a lot of good stuff about that.
Yeah, I've heard the Red Label's pretty solid. I've never used it.
It's a little cheaper than the Invizex. Like it's a few dollars cheaper.
I don't think I've ever used Suffix. It's just been basically P-Line or the Seagar. I've used the P-Line Tactical, like I said, and the heck is the other one? I'm looking for it right now. I'm on
Sunline.
Tactical wear. No, just the Ultimate Fluorocarbon line. It's a little bit cheaper that they sell.
Yeah.
I just saw this. This is new. P-line high performance copolymer top water line.
It's probably like what, a fluoro-coated mono.
Yeah, it's very similar to that Fluoro Clear I was talking about. And in the Fluoro Clear, I use the clear color. They also have it in mist green as well.
So far, my experience with fluoro has gone way up in price. So my first experience, like I was throwing mono, and I kept hearing the chatter about braid, and I was never a giant fan of braid, but I did start throwing it on spinning rods. But then when I started throwing a bait caster, everybody's like, start throwing mono first, throw cheap, because you're going to trash it until you kind of get the hang of it. And so I did that. Once I got the hang of it, I got tired of like monofilament gets really bad memory on bait casters, in my opinion. So at least the one that I was using, which at the time was a Quantum, but I decided to give the whole fluoro thing a shot. And the first thing that I noticed when I went to buy fluoro was the giant price tag on it, versus what mono was. You're looking from $8 or $9 to almost $30. And so I happened to stumble around in Field and Stream and saw Vicious on there. And they had like fluoro, 100% fluoro for like $10 for a spool of it, something real cheap. I bought it, and if I remember correctly, I'm assuming that this stuff was probably old and it wasn't being sold, so it was awful and it broke a lot. So for a little bit, I wasn't a big fan of it, but then I kind of started researching, asking around, and the infamous cigar came up in BizX. So I started throwing that. The first spool of it I had, I loved it. It was awesome. Halfway through the season, it was time to get another spool of it, and bought it and hated it. Hated the next 2 or 3 spools I got of it. Brian, I think you kind of hit the nail for what I experienced was a lot of line twist real easy. Maybe that's just due to me. I can't really put my finger on it what the issue was, but that stuff, I would backlash it all the time. I would get breaks in the reel, or it would snap in the middle of a cast, something. And so I then at that point made a switch over to Sunline FC Sniper, and fell in love with fluorocarbon because of that stuff. That stuff is, like, in my opinion, super smooth. Like, I was casting a good 30 yards further, 40 yards, 50 yards maybe at times with that, in my opinion. But that, mind you, I want to set this straight. This may not have to do with the line. All this happened during the first year and a half of me using a bait caster. So that could have been me actually getting better with a bait caster, not necessarily the line. I don't want to say that InvizX is bad line. I know just tons of people use it, love it.
Right.
It is good line. But that was just kind of like what happened with me, and the progression of going through fluoro was at the same time I was actually learning a bait caster. Once I got used to using a bait caster, though, I did, start kind of experimenting with some other fluoros, and one of them Brian's mentioned already, and I have a bunch of it because they have great deals all the time, and that's P-Line Tactical. I bought like 7 or 8 spools of it because that buy one get one free. Like if I picked a test line, I made sure I got 2 of them because I wanted to get that one for free. So, it made the price being from JP mentioned is like their lighter stuff is like, maybe $19 to $21, and then their heavier stuff's like, in the high 20s per spool. So I was like, try to match that buy one, get one free with that same exact price tag. And, I've liked that stuff so far a lot. I haven't really had a lot of issues with it. It's definitely, in my opinion, I put it back on the reel that I had with the Gamma, and it casts a lot better. Like I said, that Gamma, I don't know what it is. It just, I know it's not. I don't think it's like a line memory thing. I think that stuff is so tough and durable that when you cast, it just wants to come off the reel like way too fast because I think it might be thicker a little bit. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, but that P-line tactical deal, dude. I can't help it, but I can't help but buy a buttload of it when they have it.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
So I've heard other things about that Super Sniper FC stuff. People saying that you can cast so far with it and everything. But then I go on the internet, and the two I'm looking at is the Super Sniper and then the Invisex. And the two complaints that people seem to have is that the line kinks up or it breaks off. And I'm just curious what you guys think, if that's like user error or just bad line.
So there's one thing, and I mentioned this to Brian about a month or two ago. I had switched from buying the small 200 yard spools to bulk spools, and I think part of it is what I did notice when I bought a bulk spool was that I think there was somewhat of a memory created on that line because when I was spooling it off the spool onto the reel, it was coming off the off the bulk spool in a hard fashion. And one thing I usually do when I'm spooling, whether it's mono or fluoro, I'll take a wet towel or a wet rag, and I'll run that moisture through the line to help it seep better on the reel. Well, even doing that, I was still getting, bad twist with the cigar. But once I got down to the middle of that spool, everything started playing off nicely, and I hadn't had that problem ever since. So I'm pretty sure if it's been sitting for a while, there is some kind of memory retained in it, and you may get those rogue spools that are just crap. It happens. It's happened with mono. It happened. Now it's happened with fluoro. Brain not so much because there's zero memory to it, but that's one of like I said, just kind of pulling it off the bulk, and it was like that when it went on. It kind of like in the fire service. If it's not bared right, it's not going to come off right. Same thing with the line when it comes off onto the reel.
Well, and I think a lot of times when I get nicks and stuff, it's user error. It's from getting a backlash. Like when you backlash, a lot of times if you look down at your line and you see that like infamous like deep VU where your line's tangled up in your see, and I've learned something online. It's probably not the best thing for my reel or the line, but like to get rid of it instead of trying to pick it out or just like, tossing that rod to the side till you re-spool or whatever is to pop it, crank down on it and put your thumb on where that knot is and turn it kind of backwards. Like not turn it backwards. You're cranking the right way, but you're pushing that knot forward instead of letting it keep rolling backwards in it. And it'll a lot of times get that out. But a lot of times what I've noticed when I pull that line out, you'll feel a crease where that knot was. And you might have several of them. So the other day I had a break off, dude, in the reel, and I knew 100% that was probably from a backlash that I had. I hook set and that line just snapped right inside the reel, and so it's one of the things, but it's gonna happen. I think all fishing line fails at some point. Like it's not perfect. Whether you're bumping rocks, hitting brush, you can't see what's in there. You know what I mean? So there's nothing out there really that's 100% foolproof. But a lot of times it could be our own fault from like a backlash or something. What?
Or Chuck Norris hook sets.
That's just go big, bro. Have you seen the one where the kid hook sets the fish and it hits the wall behind him online?
No.
I almost sent it to you, Brian. Go, who does this remind you of?
Do you guys use any line conditioners such as Real Magic or anything else that's on the market?
I haven't. I've been wondering about it just to see. I've always seen that people will take spools and put it in hot water when they're, like that's like mono or fluoro to help with memory.
Yeah.
I don't know that it works. I have no idea because I've never tried it. Has anybody else tried it?
I've used it.
I've used real snot. That's what it's called. Real
I
snot.
love it. I love it.
I've used the Real Magic.
Which is verdict.
It comes in the aerosol can, but my old man was always a huge believer of that, because you got to think back in the day, when bake casters were starting to advance, and I'm talking mid to late 90s. That was the thing, was tons of backlash. You didn't have the brake systems on those reels like you do now. So he would always spray his stuff down to help prevent that, and he still to this day uses it. And I used to use it as a kid because I just wanted to be like the old man, right? And it seemed to do the trick, because I was horrible at casting bait casters back in the late 90s, when I was just learning. I'd get so frustrated with backlashes, I'd just throw everything on a spinning rod.
Yeah.
But it's something that I think gets overlooked, but I don't use it a ton. Here's a question though that I thought of is, how often are you guys replacing your line on your reels?
Not as much as I should be.
I go about. It all depends on how much usage I get out of it. If I'm out, let's say if it's tournament time, I will definitely re-spool everything before pre-fishing. That way, it's good for the entire tournament, and then strip it after the tournament. And then if I'm just fishing to fish, depends on how much I get out, but no more. It's at least every 2 months while not doing tournaments.
Okay.
Yeah, dude.
I'm like, oh man, the spool's getting empty.
That's what I do.
It's getting real empty, man.
Well, see, that's the way it used to be, and then I don't know how much of it's hogwash, man. You get around some of these tournament guys, and they're for example, camping and rooming with Alan Reed, Sam Jones, Dylan, Fuqua, these guys are re-spooling, and I'm like, oh man, should I be doing this?
Yeah.
And I think JP hit it on the head. I think it depends how much use you've got out of it. I'm not totally religious about it. I just re-spooled all my spools, I don't know, a week or two ago. I've only been on the water 2 or 3 times. Going to Table Rock next week. Will I re-spool before the tournament? Probably not. And watch, I'll lose a 25-inch smallmouth. But I think that's just it. Is how aggressive you're being. But with that being said, I don't spool my spools totally full, because I re-spool so often. So a lot of times I'll put 100 yards on instead of the full 200, and then that way I still got a half a spool. That's me being cheap, But at the same time, how often are you casting 100 yards? That's
Hey, there goes all my line.
Yeah. That's 300
Ryan's the guy's
feet.
line I keep catching all wrapped up. Does it ever end?
Oh man, I got horror stories about that. But it really depends, man. On my end, I'm just curious. I'm always curious, how often people are re-spooling, and I think
don't-
it just
I
doesn't
don't
matter.
go that often. It
Use.
doesn't matter to me. I'm not that big. I'm not that big into tournaments, so it kind of comes down to there's been a lot of times before a tournament I'm like, oh, I'm gonna re-spool, and I'm like, and then I wake up like, oh well.
Yeah, I forgot to do that.
I started. I think what it is though is with making it more specific to your your techniques. allows you to, in a sense, play around with that, right? So, like if I am throwing like crankbaits or whatever, and I know I'm hitting the bottom all the time, you'll see that line disappear. You know what I mean? Just from retying, like catching fish, like because that's one thing that I do. So I do go through line a lot. Is I retie often. I started. Like that's one thing that if I've caught like one or two smallmouth in the river, like I'll stop retie, man. I'm like that knot's gonna fail soon. So because of that, it's like I think one of my spools I'm down like halfway, so I think I'll probably switch it here in the next week or so. I do find it's easier to cast and cast well with a fuller spool. Than like a half empty one. So, and then, when you start getting on that halfway mark, man, you'll really start seeing that memory real bad, where everything's just real tight coils, coming out. So, but I'm not real religious about it, but I have no reason to be necessarily with not being really into the tournament scene like that. I mean, like even if I was doing like local tournaments, I don't think it would kind of persuade me in that direction. But maybe if I was following the KBF trail where, I'm dropping some money on entry fees and that sort of thing, trying to, get a decent paycheck out of it, I might take it more serious. But personally, no, I kind of wait until I just have this feeling that I'm like, man, that needs to be changed. So I do everything though at the beginning of every season. So
I think a couple of I just recently respooled on a couple of my rods, but my braided line, I don't think I've changed that in a year.
Yeah, I think braid, you can get away with that for sure.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like when you're talking about it from like a tournament aspect, I think, it goes back to what I was talking about with like running braid to floral leaders. Like that's just one more thing I feel something can fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's it too. Like, like you were talking about, Josh, like if I'm running my baits on this rod reel setup a lot through rock versus weeds, obviously you're going to replace that a lot sooner in the rock scenario than you are the weed scenario. That line's going to get beat up from running through rock so often. Like, like a lot of times when I fish a Ned rig, in a rocky river situation, I'm not just cutting off like a couple of inches above that. I'm like pulling 6-8 feet off, cutting that off, and then retying because I'll feel that line. And I used to be horrible about that, where I wouldn't check like the line above, and I would just cut that 3 or 4 inches off. But if you run your fingers up, and especially if you're in chunky rock, and I'm just getting ready for table rock, so that's what I'm thinking about right now. Like there's a lot of big chunky rock spots where you can get nicks in your line, like 8, even 10 feet above your bait from just dragging baits through that stuff. So just
even worse is when you fish rivers and you got current, and a lot of times you don't think about your line being wrapped around a rock. You know what I mean? It's like actually on one side. Like I kind of learned that when I first threw a Jig Masters flipping jig in the river. I was like, I could feel that jig was shooting around rocks coming out.
Yeah.
And so I was like, dude, like, wonder what that line feels. And Brian's hit it on the head, dude. Like I run my hand up, like, from anywhere like 4 feet, and just feel nick, and then like, like probably have to hit the 6 to 8 foot mark until I wouldn't feel that anymore, just because that current will wrap that line around rocks real easy.
I've started retying jackhammers because I'm just so afraid to lose one of those.
I'm the same way, dude. I'm the exact same way.
Or you'll be like me, you'll throw it for 20 minutes, like, well, I haven't lost it, so I should put that away.
Yeah.
well, up here we face the fury of northern pike, and like that tournament I fished a couple weeks ago, I kept catching them, and I was like, damn it, I know I need to retie this, because if another pike hits this, there goes $16. So I only lost 2 jackhammers that day due to pike, whereas I know someone else that lost 6 or 7. Jacob Ruff.
So here's a fun question. How many fish do you have to catch before losing one makes it worth it to you?
What do you mean?
A jackhammer.
Catch
like
him?
how,
No, how many
No,
fish
just how-
catches? How many bass catches where you're like, it's okay. It's okay
yeah,
if I
it's
lost.
okay if I lose one. How many fish would it take?
One good one. You know, like
Yeah,
we're talking like catch a 20 and then I lose one. Yeah, I'm good with that.
yeah, I think I would be too.
Mhm.
You know, but if you're talking like a bunch of like 14, 15-inch fish, I'd be pissed. I don't how many fish.
Hey, Milford would take that all day long though.
Dude, when I was up in Erie fishing against Brian, like the Saturday before, my first catch, and it's on a jackhammer, and I'm throwing that thing through weeds, and I'm like, this bait is awesome. I've never thrown anything that comes through weeds like this.
Right.
Like it was a thing of beauty, and I finally hook up, dude, and I bring it up, and I'm like,
Pike.
it's a pike, dude. Like how in the world did I not lose this thing, man? Like
That's awesome.
I think I was sewn on like 12 or 15 pound fluoro. Like I was just like, phew, I got lucky. It was a little angry snot rocket. Like I did the J thing. I brought it up in the boat, unhooked it, and just threw it away.
Yeah.
Dude, I want to go down to Dale Hollow and throw a jackhammer.
Yeah, dude, you'll love that thing through the marina. And
Where you're not supposed to fish? Or was that in front of the restaurant, or you guys were?
Oh, yeah. You remember the restaurant that had the big, giant 2, 3, 4 giant bass?
Oh
that
my
Jay
gosh, dude. Those things were huge.
Jay would sneak up, like he was posted outside that restaurant in the water. So let me set the backstory for JP. JP, we went to Dale Hollow, and they had this restaurant, and there was supposedly this little halo around it of no fishing right there. And there was bass everywhere because everybody's been throwing food off the restaurant floor into the water. And we see probably good 5-6 pound solid, easy 20-inch bass. Like there's like 3 of them. And Jay's like, I want to catch him. It's like, Jay, you're not allowed to fish there. He's like, we can fish here. He's like, we just got to wait. Well, the restaurant opened fairly early, and, it closed down at like 11 o'clock. And, by then everybody's ready to go home. But Jay would just kind of try to sneak up to that restaurant, dude. And he would throw over there maybe 2 or 3 times, and somebody'd come out and tell him not to fish there. It was so funny, dude.
Jeez.
And he'd be like, he'd try to kind of debate it a little bit. And I'm like, will you stop debating with the restaurant? Just do what they ask and leave those poor people alone. I was like, those bass probably won't even eat an artificial lure. They've been eating chicken wing bones for the past like 10 years. I was like, that thing's probably only 2 years old, and it's already a 20-inch bass because of chicken wings.
Dude, even the stupid bluegills there were huge.
Dude, they were, I mean, those things, they're like literally, this is how like hand fed these bass are. They're like carp. Wherever you walk, when you would come up to them, they would all swim up to you. Not scared of people at all. They'd come right up to the edge of the dock, dude. And if you walk to the other corner, they'd all just slowly swim over there and sit there and wait. So we fed them like,
you gotta do one of those.
Good.
You gotta do one of those videos where you hold like the chicken wing or whatever is over, have it jump out, and then just hand it pull it out.
Heck yeah, that'd be sweet.
I was telling Jay, I was like, Jay, I'll save some chicken wing bones, dude. We'll bring them out here at night, bro. Like,
let's go slow troll chicken wing bones, bro.
We got to go do that again this year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely a trip down there somewhere, man.
Yep.
But all right, I guess we'll wrap this up. Anybody else have any pressing questions or anything they want to share? Guess not. No. All right.
I like to fish.
No way. All right.
Well, to share that.
I just want to take a moment, thank everybody for listening to the final cast again. And with that, we'll go ahead and shut down. And thanks everybody, and have a good night.
We're
See ya.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle&fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle&fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in Northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. TRC Covers, protect your investment. Catch Products, shout out to Catch Products. Go to catchproducts.com and put the Paddle and Fin logo directly on your catch board. Shout out to Jig Masters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com, use promo code PNF20 and save 20% on all your jig and tackle needs.